This morning we're going to look at Pilate. Pontius Pilate, he was really one of the most pitiable figures, I think, that we have ever seen in the history of mankind. Pilate was a man who was not well liked, and there were really good reasons for that. He did a lot of really bad things. Now, when we read the account of Jesus standing before Pilate in Matthew chapter 27, sometimes we get the feeling that about, poor Pilate, poor Pilate. We feel so sorry for him. But I really don't want you to feel sorry for Pilate at all. He's one to be pitied, but really he was simply a pawn. Pilate was a pawn in the hands of the Jewish leaders who saw Jesus as a threat and would stop at nothing to see him put to death. Pilate was a pawn in the hands of Rome and the Roman officials and what they wanted to accomplish in Palestine versus what God wanted to have happen. And he was also ultimately a pawn in the hands of God to bring about His wonderful end to what began as a really, really bad thing. Now, we're going to see this morning how the religious leaders of Israel knew just which buttons to push to get Pilate to do their dirty work, something they couldn't do. And they knew just which levers to pull to get the crowd to go along with their desires and to push Pilate over the edge. Pilate considered himself a very strong man, but he was really nothing in the face of these connivers. But the wonderful thing about all of this is through this all of the shouting and the political maneuverings and the washing of the hands and all of this stuff, here's Jesus just sitting there, serene, gentle, not saying very much, but saying just the right thing at the right time. And you might see on the surface, and maybe people who just read the Gospels might think, Jesus was a wimp. What kind of a leader is this? But the one and the only one who was not a pawn and who was actually in complete and total control of this situation is Jesus Christ. So let's take a look starting in chapter 27, and we're going to begin in verse 11. Now Jesus stood before the governor. And the governor asked him, "Are you king of the Jews?" And Jesus said, "You have said so." Now, we don't get a lot from Matthew's account. Again, Matthew's giving us kind of the Reader's Digest version of the trials and crucifixion of Jesus. We're going to look at the Gospel of John here in just a second. But basically, the chief priests had come to accuse Jesus of treason and a couple other things which we'll get to in a second. And so Pilate asks him straight out, well, treason means you're trying to take over as a new king. You're trying to knock me out of my position. So are you? Are you the king of the Jews? And Jesus basically affirms it. But in the same way, if you notice how he answered Caiaphas, just saying, well, you said it. He didn't come right out and said, I sure am. He just says, as you have said, or you have said so. Now, hold your place there and turn to John chapter 18, where we get, pardon the pun, but a much fuller account of this situation here. John 18, starting in verse 33, and we'll just go down through verse 37. John 18:33. So Pilate entered his headquarters again and called Jesus and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you say this of your own accord, or did others say it to you about me?" Pilate answered, "Am I a Jew?" In other words, why would I have ever heard this before? I'm not one of your people. Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you over to me. What have you done? And Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting that I might not be delivered over to the Jews, but my kingdom is not from the world." Then Pilate said to him, "So, you are a king." Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. And Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" Jesus asks Pilate a question which indicates to us that Pilate he's just performing his duty. These Jews, they're so pesky, they're always coming before me complaining about stuff. So, all right, I'll interview this guy. Let's find out, these are serious accusations brought against you, Jesus. What have you done? And Jesus answered him pretty clearly. But if you notice the answer, it's an answer that shows that he is not a direct threat to Pilate or to Rome. He says, my kingdom's not of this world. I'm not a political ruler now. I am a religious figure. I'm a religious ruler. Or my kingdom is not of this political realm. He says, if I were a political king, then my servants would have been fighting that I might not be delivered over to the Jews. So he says, Pilate, don't worry, I'm not a threat to you, but I am the Messiah. Now, as the interrogation goes on, as we're going to see, Pilate really comes to understand that Jesus has done nothing deserving of death. He is innocent. But yet, when Jesus says, I have come to bear witness to the truth, and everybody who is of the truth listens to my voice, and Pilate just goes, well, what is truth? A very interesting admission that we'll kind of come back to here towards the end. But the question of what is truth is something that I think every single human has to deal with at some point in their life. The question is, do they come to an answer, and what is that answer? So go back to Matthew, verse 12. So we move on now. But when he was accused by the chief priests and elders, he gave no answer. Then Pilate said to him, "Do you not hear how many things they testify against you?" But he gave them no answer, not even to a single charge, so that the governor was greatly amazed. Now, in a Roman trial, you had to examine evidence against the accused. And Jesus is offering no defense whatsoever, no evidence at all to combat these charges that are being brought. Now, what were the charges? Well, Luke tells us, if you want to jot down the reference to Luke 23, verses 1 through 5, the charges were this: we found this man misleading our nation and forbidding us to give tribute to Caesar, and saying that he himself is Christ, a king. Now, they're very smart, humanly speaking, in how they bring these charges. Misleading our nation, subverting is another word that is used there, or perverting the nation. This could be considered to be like fomenting rebellion. Forbidding to give tribute to Caesar. Remember the whole thing about, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar, and render unto God that which is God. I mean, they're taking little bits and pieces of things that Jesus said, taking them out of context, and then trying to turn them around against him. And then saying that he himself is Christ, a king. Technically, Jesus never actually said that, but others did say that about him. But a king, of course, that's the charge of treason. Now, that's the charge that could get Jesus executed. These are all pretty serious charges. So why didn't Jesus say anything? And Matthew makes a pretty good point of telling us he said nothing, not even to one single charge. Well, I'll give you two reasons why that was, why Jesus remained silent. First of all, it was prophesied. That was how Jesus was, the Messiah, was supposed to act. Jot down Isaiah chapter 53, verse 7, which says, he was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. Like a lamb that is led to the slaughter, and like a sheep before its shearers is silent, so he opened not his mouth. Very important, prophetically, that Jesus say nothing, because he was to bear everything that we have ever done. He was not to defend himself at all. He could have, because he was innocent. He could have said, I am innocent of everything that is being leveled against me, because in fact he was. That would have been probably